It's my extreme pleasure, and welcome to our Meet Our Member series, to go ahead and introduce Steve Hooper, the President of Financial Services at Tiphaus. So, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Pleasure to be with you, and excited to be one of the newer members of the IFBTA.
Well, you're an industry supporting member, which means you are supporting the industry, and we're certainly very happy to have you and Tiphaus on board. Actually, it's sort of an interesting story how I met you guys in the first place. I know we were in conversations for a while, but we were both speaking on panels and presenting at the Washington State Hospitality Show last year.
We were, yeah. No, that was back when I was wearing my operator hat. I was on the board back then, and it was great to meet you for the first time. And here we are almost a year later, and look at us.
So with your operator hat, before we get started here, because that's always an interesting conversation as to what is your background as an operator?
Yeah, so I started my own restaurant group about 13, 14 years ago, and built that up and merged that with a bigger restaurant group and ran that for about 5 years during the best years of the pandemic. And then all along the way was leveraging technology in a variety of different capacities. And actually brought the Tiphaus solution into the restaurant group I was running here in Seattle. And so was a customer first, and then became a part of the team later.
Well, that always works out really well when you have that customer perspective, for sure, in understanding the people that you're selling to, but also understanding innovation. Now, can you go ahead and give us sort of an overview of Tiphaus so that everybody knows what it is? And of course, I'm very curious about what a president of financial services means.
Very good. Yes, I'll get to both of those. Yeah, so Tiphaus is a fully automated end-to-end tip management and distribution platform. So we integrate directly through APIs into the point of sale systems of the different restaurant groups or other food and beverage operators. And we pull all the data that we need to do tip calculations. So tip pooling, tip sharing, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of a fancy calculator or a spreadsheet on that side of it. But then we also do tip distribution. So if you want to pay out tips daily, or if you're looking to, replace, some restaurant groups still do cash every day at the end of the shift. And so there's a electronic replacement for that in the way we distribute tips.
So just out of curiosity, there's a lot of focus on tips and how servers and people get paid in the industry. And of course, today, there's even more tipping than there was before, because it seems like everywhere you go, there's the question, do you want a tip in there? It must be pretty complicated, to figure out how tipping works in different places and different jurisdictions.
Yeah, no, that's a big part of what we do on behalf of our customers. California just implemented actually today a new law around hidden fees and service charges and all that stuff. And we try and keep on top of that stuff and let our customers know, hey, this change is coming. This is a challenge that you're going to be facing, and that kind of thing. So being on the it's the only thing we spend all day doing, and operators have 100 things they need to do every single day. And so if we can provide them with better information about that kind of stuff, that's always helpful to them.
So where you fit is obviously a very important place to keeping employees happy. Because if they're not happy, they're not staying. And of course, you don't want to mess with anybody's pay,
No.
That's there. And as you pointed out, the laws are changing, all the time. But some people might say that, oh, wait a second, why aren't you just getting that from the POS? Why isn't that just coming from the normal ways? Why do you have to have a different type of system? So what sets you apart from those types of systems and then the competitors in the market?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the Tiphaus platform was created to respond to a need in the marketplace. Every single restaurant does it a little differently. And so what we found existed in the marketplace were pretty inflexible platforms that didn't really give the kind of fine tuning for the way that specific restaurant or restaurant group wants to.
Well, they were probably more made for the governmental reporting than they were, in fact, for the restaurant reporting and the employees.
Yeah, and they were built with sort of a lack of sort of the functionality to really get granular on the actual micro level of, let's say you want to give 3% of liquor, beer, and wine sales to your bartender from your servers, right? Like that level of nuance just wasn't built into the platforms before. And then, as a result, there are POSs that do have a piece of software that does tip management. But those are POS companies, and they're not really focused on this area. And so that was the opportunity that we had to sort of do a better version of what they had, and actually get a lot of traction around that.
Well, I call that a best of breed application that's a specialist in an area. And even if people are generalists, they're never going to do it as well as somebody who's a specialist in it. But yet, my guess is that you're required to have integration with the other types of systems.
That's correct. Yeah. So we have got about 14 or 15 POS integrations already directly into the APIs of pretty much any major POS brand you can think of right now. And then we also integrate into the payroll systems.
That would have been my next question.
Yep. So we do we get all of that data. So it's a fully automated system end to end, so that the payroll teams and my own payroll team at my restaurant group, when I implemented Tiphaus, I had 2 payroll folks and about 30 restaurants. They spent 4 days collectively between the 2 of them every week managing the tip spreadsheets or issues related to tips and all that kind of stuff. After Tiphaus was implemented, it took about 4 hours to do the tip management for one person. So just like reducing back office process.
And they don't have to worry about mistakes, and they don't have to worry about the government coming after them because somebody's going to trust the information that's coming this way.
Exactly. And the other half of the platform as well, we have a free employee app. So employees can see exactly how much they made in tips yesterday. So there's this big level of transparency that we add for both employees and the payroll teams and HR and all that kind of stuff. So it becomes a really open and transparent system.
So I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, since you're the president of financial services, which means you have to know everything, and you are also an operator. So, tipping, besides the governmental regulation, seems to be an area that also is becoming more complex, that people are looking for very creative ways to do tipping. And you already mentioned it, whether you're doing pooling of tips, hotels do service charges, and then they have tips. And it gets confusing because you may want to have different ways of doing it, just like payroll is confusing when you have people doing different job categories, right? Yep. But at the same time, it also gets confusing, to the customers in there, who are coming in there. So how do you navigate those waters of confusion, but also opportunity to be creative and flexible and give something better for the employee?
Yeah. So there are 2 ways that we sort of help in that world. One is by creating a lot of that transparency I was just talking about before. Groups that have the employee app, their employees know exactly how their tips get distributed because they can see it every day in that app. And when a customer asks, they have got answers as opposed to, I don't know, or something like that, which is, if it's just sitting in your handbook, right, back to the governmental regulations, nobody's reading the handbook. We all know that.
Right.
So I think that's one side of it. And I think with a platform like ours, having that confidence that it's always going to be done right, there isn't going to be an error in there. Nobody's skimming. It's impossible to do that because all the data is coming through via the point of sale APIs and all that kind of stuff. That just breeds confidence between the employee and employer situation for sure. So I think it's definitely gotten complicated and more. What we've seen is the higher wage states actually have the most complicated tip rules, because they're using the tip pool itself or the service charge or whatever to differentiate, because the minimum wage is so high that they're using that tip pool to differentiate jobs. And so they get much more complicated as the wages go up, is what we've noticed.
I'd really like to thank, and it's been a great conversation with Steve Hooper, the president of financial services for Tiphaus, and welcome as a industry supporter of the IFBTA.
Thanks, Rob.